Good evening, friends.
Good evening.
Uh, yeah, uh, I am your host, Sudhir Chandi. I am an insolvency professional, registered valuer, a chartered accountant, and a partner with Resurgent Resolution Professionals LLP. We have with us Mr. R.R. Modi. I'll introduce to him. First, we'll come to the topic, the agenda of today's session. As we all know that IBC code has classified individuals into three classes, namely personal guarantors to CDs,
Mr. Sudhir is rejoining again. There is some connection issue. Sorry for the inconvenience. Just he's rejoining in 5 minutes. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Hello, am I connected now?
Yeah, sir. Now you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So as I was telling, so three different categories, individuals have been divided into, and in the phased manner, government wants the implementation of insolvency for individuals. So on 15th November, government notified that from 1st December onwards, the provisions of the code relating to personal guarantors to CDs will start. And on the same day, they notified the rules also for personal insolvency and for bankruptcy. And similarly, IBBI also came out with the regulations for that. So today we are together. We have Mr. Modi with us. So he's a chartered accountant with 3 decades of experience. He's also a partner with the Resurgent Resolution Professionals LLP, which is an IPE. And he's a chartered accountant and an insolvency professional, and mainly deals with direct tax litigations, audits. Currently he is engaged in IBC assignments. He was also a co-opted member of Central Council Committee on Trade Laws and WTO of ICAI. And he has also delivered lectures in Singapore and all. Sir, last session that you took, we got a very positive response. So that has given us strength to, conduct this new session. So I hope, people will, be enlightened by your views. And so I hand over the mic to Mr. Modi to take over.
Thank you, and today, who have forwarded words of appreciation. So that obviously that acts as an encouragement for me to do more research in the line. And this is a very good initiative by our headquarter, I will say. To utilize this time during this trying period fruitfully. It's a very good initiative and it's really laudable. So not only, the Resurgent is organizing the program on insolvency, but also on many other issues. And it's really a very laudable objective. Now, friends, coming to the topic, and before I come to the topic, it's always give a huge comfort level when you have on the dais. Here the dais is online dais. So when you have on the online dais, a person like Sudhirji, who is so enriched in the knowledge, so that increases my comfort cushion a little bit, because If I do any error or I mean, then he is there to rectify me. So it is for the benefit of all of us. So Sudhirji, I will be looking for you whenever you feel like that you need some modification or anything like that.
Sir,
You
you are
can
just
deliver us.
being so modest. I'll be there to assist you, sir, whenever required. Thank you so much, sir.
Right, sir. Now, friends, regarding the guarantee, I mean, we are today on the topic of personal guarantee. And we all know that we do not have much of the jurisprudence as far as the IBC is concerned in the matters relating to personal guarantee. But the law is still evolving. But we can take the cues from the matters relating to guarantee in the matter relating to the corporate guarantee. So, which were deliberated quite a bit even till apex court. So, before we delve into the topic of personal guarantee, it is really important to go into the current standing of the guarantee. I mean, as far as the IBC is concerned, we all know that so far as the guarantee is concerned, it comes from the Indian Contract Act, Section 126 to Section 140 deals with contract of guarantees. And we also know that the guarantee, I mean the guarantor, the liability of the guarantor is coextensive, is in coexistence with that of the principal borrower. So we'll discuss those things in detail. We'll take up the Contract Act also one by one, all the clauses. So friends, if you take the cues from the, couple of judgments, I will be dividing my session into three parts. First, I will be deliberating on the general aspect of the guarantee and to tell you, to really come to a conclusion that these provisions of personal guarantee which have been notified with effect from 1st of December, which are applicable from 1st of December 2019, so whether these provisions will be of really great boon to the society or to the creditors. I mean, this needs to be, because again, the notifications which have come, again, the courts will have a very trying time, let me tell you, to come out with the different precedents like we have in the CIRP in the beginning. So here also they will have a trying time. Let us start with the things like, when the only thing is, it says that the personal guarantee in application, this will be applicable to whom? Let us come with this. This will be applicable to the personal guarantors who are personal guarantors to the corporate debtor, not to the corporate guarantor. If they are corporate guarantor, the CIRP provisions are already there. Now, personal guarantor, the point is where the application will be filed for the personal guarantors. Who is the adjudicating authority here? The adjudicating authority, it says that in case of a personal guarantor insolvency process, the adjudicating authority will be the authority which has already taken up the case of CIRP against the principal borrower, against the corporate debtor. So if A Limited is the corporate debtor, whose CIRP is already going in the NCLT Delhi principal bench, then Mr. A happens to be the director who has given a personal guarantee, then as far as the initiation of the proceedings against Mr. A is concerned, that will also be filed with NCLT Principal Bench Delhi. But if Mr. A has given guarantee to say A Limited, B Limited, C Limited, D Limited, and all these A Limited, B Limited, C Limited, D Limited are different jurisdictions. One is in NCLT Ahmedabad, one is in NCLT. And if the insolvency in part 3 of IBC code, then which NCLT will be the choice? Is it a question of choice or there is any law? Which will, whether we'll file it with NCLT Mumbai or NCLT Kolkata or Delhi or so there is no answer. If there is no answer, then what do we do? Now, if you all remember that in the case of Videocon, we have a ruling. In the case of a Videocon, we have a ruling of the NCLT. Probably, this is not the law. Where we can look at some precedents. As per the precedent is concerned, one precedent is there in the case of Videocon, where the NCLT has given a ruling. The ruling was in something. In the Videocon case, a lot of group companies cases were also there in the CRP, because most of them or each of them has given a guarantee to, for each other. So it was a sort of many companies in the group facing CIRP. Now the matter was decided, why not? These entire things should be consolidated. So this entire thing should be consolidated, and and it was ultimately consolidated also in one particular NCLT, and that particular NCLT was selected to be the first NCLT which took up the case of the Videocon group. So probably this cue can be taken. I'm not saying what will happen. I'm just telling you what could be the possible scenario in such sort of situation. Now, friends, supposing again taking the same case, A Limited is not under CIRP, but the lenders want to go against Mr. A under Part 3. Now, where they will go? There is no CIRP as far as the A Limited or the principal borrower is concerned. But the lenders want to move against Mr. A under Part 3. Then the law is very clear as per the notification, that in that case, since there are no proceedings pending before any NCLT, so far as the corporate debtor is concerned, against the corporate debtor, then in this scenario, the Mr. A's initiation against Mr. A will be before DRT, Debt Recovery Tribunal. So this has to be understood in a very clear way. Only when any proceeding relating to the CIRP or the anything, liquidation or the NCLT, any NCLT, insolvency matter will be taken up by that very NCLT. If no proceedings are pending before any NCLT whatsoever against the principal borrower or the corporate debtor, in that situation, the personal guarantors adjudicating authority in the matter of personal guarantor will be on the debt recovery tribunal, and then on the matter will travel to the Supreme Court as it is there in the NCLT, then NCLT, and then Supreme Court. Now, friends, coming back to this provisions relating to the guarantee. Now, friends, we all know that this Essar Steel case, which is really, one of the most famous landmark judgments in the entire this history of 3 years of IBC. Now, Essar Steel judgment, we all know that it is the COC versus Satish Kumar Gupta. NCLT gave a ruling. NCLT gave a ruling here that NCLT gave a ruling that so far as the personal guarantors are concerned, any guarantor are concerned, any corporate guarantor, any guarantor are concerned or personal guarantors are concerned, their liability is coextensive. Secondly, they gave a ruling that if the guarantor are made to pay the amount of the principal borrower by the lender by way of invoking of the guarantee, then the right of subrogation arises as per the Indian Contract Act. And as per this right of subrogation, the lender can, the guarantor can recover the money from the principal borrower for whom he has given the guarantee. Now, in case of Essar Steel, the company, already the resolution plan have been approved. The company has gone to the successful bidder. Now, by virtue of this right of subrogation, can these personal guarantors who have been made to pay this amount, can they now ask the money from the new resolution applicant or the corporate debtor, the corporate debtor for whom the resolution plan has already been approved and is under implementation. The Supreme Court came out with a ruling after this. NCLT gave a ruling in favor of the guarantor. But the Supreme Court came out with a fantastic ruling that is probably the greatest yardstick as of now in terms of guarantee. The Supreme Court said that the creditors, one very clear ruling that the creditors can invoke the contract of personal guarantee during the insolvency proceedings. I mean, this one thing they said, and second thing is the right of subrogation is not available to the creditor, to the guarantors when the corporate debtors resolution plan has already been approved. That is the main thing. Now the point here is, now the guarantors, as per the Indian Contract Act, when the Indian contractor is a very, very old contract, old statute in the in India, is still there. So what will affect, what will ultimately happen in the country? This will really weaken our financial market so far as the guarantors are concerned. Now, we all remember in 2013, 2016 onwards, probably, if I remember correctly, there was a RBI circular which says that in cases of restructuring, in all the cases, personal guarantee has to be obtained of the promoters. Now, that mandated this requirement. Now, pursuant to that, every restructuring case, the directors have to give their personal guarantee. Now, those companies are under CIRP, then obviously the personal guarantee, the invocation against the guarantors also can be made. Invocation of the guarantee can be made, and the initiation of insolvency proceeding against the personal guarantors can also be taken up. But if they have no right of subrogation, that really raises a big question mark. But the point is, once again, we'll discuss another judgment, which is the judgment of Piramal case given by the NCLAT. This is again a very important judgment in the sense that NCLAT in the case of Piramal, that was Dr. Vishnu Kumar Agarwal versus Piramal Enterprises Limited. It very categorically said two things. That Section 7 there is a principal borrower company and there is a guarantor company, corporate guarantor company, corporate guarantor. It very clearly says that Section 7 application can be filed against both of them, no issue. But if one is admitted for the same claim, if the one is admitted for the same claim, the second cannot be admitted. Number 1 point. In other words, it also says, that if a claim, when a petition is admitted, when an application is admitted before NCLT, for both of them, say for the guarantor and for corporate guarantor and for the principal borrower, then in that case, it also says that the claim has to be filed when the CRP starts. And if for the same amount of debt, a claim is filed by the lender before the principal borrower CIRP and also to the in the CRP proceedings of the guarantor, corporate guarantor also. So it means he is filing two claims, double claims. This Piramal case, NCLAT have very categorically stated there cannot be two claims as such. There cannot be. So it means two claims cannot be filed for the same amount of the debt. Now this has given rise to another this important issue. This Piramal case have come after this Essar Steel judgment. This Piramal case has come after this Essar Steel judgment. But Piramal case is pending before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will have to take a call now. Very in a very holistic way, if I can say so. That what will be the scenario? Now Supreme Court says that on the one hand that the guarantee can be executed against the personal guarantors. Now, and again the IBC, this Piramal says that the IBC proceeding cannot be done against both the companies for the same amount of the debt. So we have a conflicting view. The Supreme Court, when the matter is pending, view of the entire guarantee scenario, corporate guarantee scenario, or the personal guarantee scenario, and probably they have to examine the other issues also. Going extra length, in the sense that if the proceedings of the personal guarantee also comes before the NCLT, the adjudicating authority, how these will be conducted, whether they will be merged with the corporate, with the main CIRP of the corporate guarantee, corporate debtor, or they will be run parallelly, or there will be a common resolution professional, insolvency professional. What will be the modus operandi? Or will they be going all all will be going independently, although with the same adjudicating authority, but will they be going independently? No, the process or the regulation or the rules which have been so far notified do not talk about any of these. That is why I said at the outset that the courts will have a very trying time while adjudicating or while delivering the judgments in the matter of personal guarantee. Now, further, one important thing, one very important case law regarding, now, as per the Indian Contract Act, it says that if there is a variation in the terms of the contract between the lender and the borrower, and if it is not known, or without the consent of the guarantor, then the guarantee will not be valid. Guarantor will stand discharged. We'll discuss the one by one provisions of the Contract Act also. Now, here the variation is material variation. Obviously, it cannot be a minor variation. So, guarantor liability. Now the point is, as per one of the judgment, as per the Hisar Steel judgment, I mean, in Hisar Steel judgment particularly, they have cited section 31(1) of the IBC, wherein they have very clearly said, 31(1) says that any resolution plan once approved by the NCLT, adjudicating authority, will be binding on all stakeholders, including guarantors. Now the point is, when a resolution plan is approved without the consent of the guarantor, but then it is approved by the process of law, by the operation of law, whether the guarantor's liability will continue or will it cease. As for the Hisar Steel, they have applied section 31(1), and it very clearly says that it is applicable and binding on all the stakeholders, including guarantors. So now this remains to be examined. I mean, Supreme Court has to come out in a very holistic way. I mean, how this scenario will prevail, I mean, ultimately in future. I tell you, in one of the case in Kolkata, which is the case of Skipper Textile by the NCLT Kolkata bench. In one of the case, the RP, resolution professional, have admitted a claim against the uninvoked bank guarantee. And matter somehow came before the NCLT, Kolkata bench. The Kolkata bench said, how can you admit an uninvoked bank guarantee claim when there is already a case of Piramal? Piramal case is there, which is of superior authority judgment. So why are you not following the judicial discipline? And the NCLT Kolkata bench suo moto removed the resolution professional because of only his act of admitting an amount of uninvoked bank guarantee in a particular case of Skipper Textile. Now, this friend, what I want to tell you, that after this Piramal case, though before that we have a Supreme Court judgment of Hisar Steel, but most of the NCLTs, rather all the NCLTs across India, are now following Piramal case like anything, right? And considering that Piramal case only, here the RP was removed and the new RP was appointed suo moto without any recommendation from the COC. So these are the things which the Supreme Court will have to answer. Probably when this Piramal case comes up before them. And friends, there is one important judgment also which I need to talk about regarding the Jayaprakash, regarding the JP Infratech Limited. Now, JP Infratech Limited, in this case, we all know that this transaction, this Supreme Court judgment, which has come very recently, there are two aspects, there are two limbs of the Supreme Court judgment here. One aspect is regarding the PUF transaction, preferential, undervalued, and fraudulent transaction. One aspect is this. And another aspect is about the guarantee, corporate guarantee. As far as the PUF transaction is concerned, here the case was that the JP Infratech Limited is a subsidiary of Jayaprakash Associate Limited, JAL. Now, JAL, took some big amount of loan, more than rupees 50,000. I don't remember the exact figure. More than 50,000 crore of loan. This is a holding company, and 78% is the holding in the JP Infra. Now, JP Infratech was under CIRP. Now, before CIRP, Jayaprakash Associates have taken a loan from the lenders of amount exceeding rupees 50,000, And for that loan, they have mortgaged the property of GAL, which is now under CIRP, worth rupees something around 8,000 or 9,000 crores or 6,000, something like that. Now the question came up. I mean, when the resolution professional, was doing the transaction audit, he was of the view that this transaction is fraudulent. This transaction is preferential in nature, and the company which is under CIRP, that is the Jayaprakash Infratech Limited, was not at all benefited by this transaction. And since it is a fraudulent transaction, he did not allow even the financial creditors who are the lenders for Jayaprakash Associate Limited, even to the COC. Matter traveled to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court gave a ruling very clearly that it is a fraudulent transaction, preferential transaction, number one. Because the company was not benefited, the joint lenders permission was not taken. There were many other arguments, and the resolution professional has found an opinion that it is a preferential transaction. And another thing regarding the guarantee, there was another claim that by the lenders of the JAL, Jayaprakash Associate, that they should form part of the secured lender in the COC of the JIL, JP Infratech Limited, JIL, which the Supreme Court said nothing doing. Number one, it is a fraudulent transaction, it's a preferential transaction. And number two, in the entire order, they have not used the word guarantee. They have said they have mortgaged, and this mortgage itself is not, is under challenge, and we have held it to be fraudulent. So they cannot be a financial creditor at all. They cannot be part of COC. They can be just like any other creditor, like operator. They can file the claim just like any other creditor, but they cannot be part of the they cannot be part of the COC. This is to the extent the Supreme Court has gone in this case. President, looking at the Essar Steel case, looking at the JAL case, in the Skipper Textile case of NCLT Kolkata, with due respect to the adjudicating authority, I'm really still not able to fathom how this RP can be removed. But friends, again, this ruling is there. So those who are practicing from Kolkata or the cases which are there in Kolkata, we must take note of this thing, that this is the extreme measure which the Kolkata NCLT have taken. Now, now coming back to the thing, couple of things which I said, that how these proceedings will be conducted, whether they will be common resolution professional or they will be different resolution professionals. So this is something which need to be taken. So friends, after discussing, all these things, whatever is applicable to the corporate guarantor will similarly apply to the personal guarantors also, right? So if the Piramal case is applicable to the corporate guarantor, so if the corporate CIRP proceedings are pending before the NCLT adjudicating authority against the principal borrower, the corporate debtor, then as per that, obviously there cannot be any proceeding against the guarantor, be it a corporate guarantor, or the same will apply even to the personal guarantor. So that subject to this discussion, what will happen, we really don't know what is there in store for us. But Supreme Court will have to come up, because the judgment of the Essar Steel is somewhat in contravention of this Indian Contract Act also, the right of subrogation, as I told you. So these things need to be discussed need to be dealt with by the Apex Court. But friends, apart from that, then there are a couple of other judgments. Like we have section 14, which talks about the moratorium under the IBC in case of CIRP, and then we have another section 60 subsection 2. Now, section 60 subsection very clearly says that in case of a guarantor, the application can be filed before the NCLT. Whereas section 14 says that there have been a judgment also that if if a CIRP is pending, then nobody can move against the guarantor, because that will create a charge against the principal debtor. The corporate debtor, because the moment money is recovered from a guarantor, then he will file a claim. He will file a claim before the main borrower, principal borrower, who is under CIRP. So that will probably act against the concept of moratorium. But then after a lot of judgment for and against, ultimately now after this Allahabad High Court judgment by way of a writ in Sanjeev Sriya case, now probably if the things are well settled, the moratorium will apply only to the CIRP of the company concerned. It will not apply to the guarantor assets. So the lenders can move ahead with the guarantor assets. This one thing is now very clear and certain. And Section 62 is obviously saying that allowing, even IBC is also allowing that the guarantor case can be filed before the same NCLT. Now let me come to the topic of today's, second aspect of my topic. I will now open my PowerPoint presentation. There are two PowerPoint presentations which I will be sharing right now over the screen, and then I will be delivering it, emailing it to the to my headquarter also, and from there they can share it with all the audience for their benefit in future. So now I'm sharing, opening my PPT. Yeah, friends. Now, Sudhirji at the outset told us that there was an amendment. There was an amendment in the IBC way back in 2017, to be exact, 23rd of November 2017. Before that, the section 2 subsection 2 subsection E had the language partnership firms and individuals. There was only one item, partnership firms and individuals, means the insolvency proceeding can be taken against the partnership firms or the individuals. But in 23rd of November 2017, this 2E was substituted by 2E, F and G. Now this, in a way, this E was broken into three parts. The first part was that personal guarantors of the corporate person, that was E. Then 2E. 2F was partnership firms and the proprietary firms. And number 3 was other individuals who are not covered in E above. Now, friends, we all know, looking at our general concept, the individuals and the proprietary firms are one and same. But here they have created two categories. For the proprietary firm, they have created another category, and for individuals, they have created another category, as far as the filing of insolvency proceeding against them is concerned, right? But the other way around is not possible. If a proprietary firm wants to file and wants to initiate an CRP proceeding against a company, it cannot do. The other way around is not possible. This is only if somebody wants to file, though the clause is not applicable as of now, if somebody wants to file against a proprietary firm, there is an enabling clause, it can file. Now, friends, why these three bifurcation was made in 23rd of 11, 2017, that needs to be understood. Because the government was well aware of the fact this entire part 3 cannot be implemented in one go. It has to be implemented in phased manner. Visualizing this situation well in advance, they bifurcated this into three parts. Basically, the purpose of the three parts is that it will be implemented in three different phases. So now, first of all, they are implementing it for the personal guarantors to the corporate person or corporate debtor, whatever we call it, right? Corporate debtor. Now, for the personal guarantor. So now this amendment has come in the year 2017, but the rules and the regulations regarding the personal guarantor initiation of insolvency has come with effect from 1st of December 2019. Now, as far as other two criteria are concerned, categories are concerned, these are still not in force. Now, friends, we all know in the CIRP, we have two types of CRP. One is fast track CRP and another is normal CRP other than fast track, right? The time limit is half in fast track. Now, and then we have a liquidation. If there is if the CRP fails, automatically it is leading to the liquidation. And in the liquidation, it's a liquidation, and in liquidation we have another chapter which is called voluntary liquidation. So this is all about in the corporate world. But as in the personal guarantee part 3, we have a concept like, as far as the insolvency resolution is concerned, the insolvency resolution is divided into two types. One is called a fresh start. And second is other than the fresh start. there are two types, like we have fast track there, and other than fast track, here we have two types. One is the fresh start and another is other than fresh start. Now, so far as the fresh start is concerned, these provisions are still not applicable. These provisions are still not applicable. Now, so far as the fresh start is concerned, because fresh start provisions are dealt with under section 80 to section 92. Now, these provisions are yet to be notified. What is a fresh start? Let us, I mean, in a very nutshell, I'll just tell you. I mean, fresh start is for very small, I mean, very, very poor people, I can say it like, I mean, the conditions, I mean, when the fresh start provisions will apply, I mean, when the income of the debtor is less than rupees, less than INR 5,000 rupees per month. So you can imagine where the debt amount is equal to or less than 35,000 only. It's a very meager sum. I really don't know in these cases of fresh start, I mean, how the RP will, earn his fees or how the things will be conducted. It remains to be seen. So these are the 5 conditions which are there on the screens for the fresh start. It is not yet put into force, friends. Now, let me go back again. Let me go back. Yeah. Now we are discussing about part 3. Let me tell you, friends, the part 3 of the chapter, I mean, before 18th of March 2020, this 2020, the part 3 was not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir, right? From 18th of March, after this abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution, from 18th of March, even the part 3, which was hitherto not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir, is now fully applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. Now, friends, as far as part 3 is concerned, it has been divided into 7 chapters. The first chapter has only 2 sections, section 78 and section 79, which talks about the threshold limit, like we have section 4 and section 5 in the CIRP. We very well know that section 4 talks about a threshold limit of rupees 1 lakh. It was talking about a threshold limit of 1 lakh. Now it has been made to 1 crore rupees. But here, the threshold limit is only rupees 1,000 rupees. So in case of a personal guarantor, it's a very, very small amount of 1,000 rupees. And here the maximum which the central government can prescribe is 1 lakh rupees. So it cannot have more than 1 lakh rupees. Like in the CRP, the minimum amount of the threshold was 1 lakh, which the central government could prescribe. And the maximum amount was rupees 1 crore, which the government could prescribe. So they have notified it. Now they have touched the highest figure, which is 1 crore. But here there is, the threshold is still rupees 1,000 rupees. Now, second chapter, then section 79 talks about certain definitions. So let us not go into this now at this stage. Then there is chapter 2, which is section 80 to section 92, which is regarding fresh start, not applicable. Then chapter 3, section 94 to section 120, it is obviously applicable from 1st of December. Chapter 4 talks about the bankruptcy order. I mean, like in the company case, CRP case, we have first the CIRP, I mean the insolvency resolution process, corporate insolvency resolution process. Here we call it insolvency resolution process, right? Now, once the insolvency resolution is failing, then there is not automatic bankruptcy. Then the person concerned can file an application for the bankruptcy. So we have a bankruptcy here. Now in the liquidation, the insolvency professional is nomenclated as liquidator, but here in bankruptcy of individual, the insolvency professional have been nomenclated as bankruptcy trustee. In the insolvency professional of an individual, there is only RP, there is no IRP here, whereas in the case of CRP, we have first IRP for 1 month, then we have the RP. Now there is a chapter 5, which is from section 149 to section 178, which talks about the administration and the distribution of the estate of the banker. Like we have there chapter 50, I mean section 52, 53, we all know there. We have a different waterfall mechanism here. Now there is a chapter 6 from 179 to section 183, which talks about the powers of the adjudicating authority, right? Which is the DRT, obviously. And then chapter 7, which is comprising of section 184, 185, 186, and 187, which talks about different offenses and penalties. Now, friends, couple of questions which I've already discussed, but then quick glance through it. Now, question number 1, FAQ short: whether the application of individual who is not whether an application for initiation of insolvency for an individual can be filed who is not a guarantor. An individual is not a guarantor, can proceed. No, it cannot be initiated because it is not yet made applicable. Now, whether the application for a partnership firm can be filed, no, it is not yet made applicable. Whether the application for an individual who has who has not given who has given a guarantee, who has given guarantee to a partnership firm. There is a person, an individual person, who has given a guarantee for the debts of a partnership firm. Whether the insolvency can be initiated against him, that individual, no. It is only the guarantors to a corporate debtor, right? Corporate debtor means two types of person: a company or a LLP. Now, whether it is applicable to the personal guarantor to a CD, yes, very much yes. Whether it is applicable to the personal guarantor to the CD, where CRP is already initiated against CD, yes. Now, this again I have discussed. If A is a personal guarantor to 3 CDs who all are in CIRP in different NCLT jurisdiction, age insolvency process application will be filed with which adjudicating authority? There is no answer as of now, but then we can draw the clue, as I said, by virtue of the adjudicating authority judgment in Videocon, Mumbai. Now, friends, let us just see what are the major differences between the CIRP and IRP. This will make us to understand, assimilate the facts before we go into the nuances. I mean, CRP is related to the corporate person, and here we call it IRP, insolvency resolution process. There we call it corporate insolvency resolution process. So the CRP is related to the corporate person. It is related to the individual, personal guarantor right now. Now, failed CIRP is followed by liquidation automatically. If the CIRP fails, there is automatic trigger for liquidation. No such case here. If the resolution fails in IRP in case of individual, it does not trigger automatic bankruptcy. A separate application for the bankruptcy has to be filed. Now, if IP in the CIRP is called IRP or RP, and in liquidation it is called liquidator. Here the IP is called RP in insolvency, and in bankruptcy it is called bankruptcy trustee. Then two CIRP process. I mean, we know that the normal and the fast track. Here we have the fresh start and the insolvency resolution. Now COC, in case of CRP, we form the COC. Here there is no COC. Here it is called meeting of creditors. They do not use the word committee of creditors. They use the word meeting of creditors. Now in CIRP, the directors are part of the COC, but they have no voting power. So they have, in a way, they have no say in the COC. But here, the personal guarantor have a sort of veto in MOC. Without his approval, no repayment plan can be approved. Now, in CIRP, the constitution of COC is a must. But in IRP, MOC constitution is not a must requirement. It is not required. If the RP feels like that meeting of the creditors should be convened, then it should be convened. If it feels like no, it is not required, then even MOC will not be constituted. Next is there is no concept of interim moratorium as far as the CIRP is concerned. Now, friends, what I mean by interim moratorium, because we all know that when we file an application before adjudicating authority, right, it takes 7 to 8 months or 9 months around for the case to be admitted or rejected. Now, during this period, there is no interim moratorium in the case of CIRP. But in case of IRP, interim moratorium starts the moment one files an application for initiation of insolvency, irrespective of the fact whether it will be ultimately admitted or it is rejected. Now, this interim moratorium, which will be there in the IRP, will again stop when finally the application is admitted. Once the application is admitted, then the moratorium will start and interim moratorium will come to an end. Then here in CIRP, we prepare a resolution plan. In IRP, we prepare the repayment plan. Now here, the debtors and the promoters has no role to play. Debtors and the promoters have no role to play in the preparation of the resolution plan. And here, the personal guarantor prepares the repayment plan. He himself prepares the repayment plan with the help of RP. supervision of the implementation of the resolution plan. Here there is a error. Supervision of implementation of the resolution plan is by the monitoring agency in CIRP. Here in IRP, the supervision is kept by the RP itself. Adjudicating authority in case of CIRP is NCLT. Adjudicating authority in case of IRP can either be DRT or NCLT, which I have already discussed. COC consists of only of financial creditors in case of CIRP. Here MOC consists of all creditors, whether it is secured, unsecured, operational, or anyone. Then CIRP cannot be initiated by IP. In case of CIRP, the CIRP application has to be made, we know, either section 7, 9, or 10, either by the lender or by the either by the financial creditor or by the operational creditor or by the corporate debtor, right? But here in case of IRP, but not by the insolvency professional. But in IRP, even the lender or the guarantor, they can initiate, I mean, they can file it through their RP, resolution professional. Now, friends, I've already discussed this fresh start. And now, friends, what has actually happened with effect from 1st of December 2019? What are the clauses? I mean, what are the sections which have come into force? I mean, section 2, subsection E have come into force, which I've already dealt with. Then section 78 and section 79 have been notified. Section 94 to section 187, these have been notified. Then section 239, clause G, section 239 from clause D to clause. What is section 239? Section 239 talks about power to make rules. Power to make rules lies with the central government. Central government have delegated it to Ministry of Company Affairs, Ministry of Company Affairs or Corporate Affairs. And so this talks about the power to make rules regarding, these are under section 239. And then another 239, then clauses, power to, then section 240. There are certain notification sections notified in 240, which are power to make regulations. And then section 249. Lastly, there is section 249. 249 talks about the amendment, is amendment in the 5th schedule, which are amendment in the RDB Act. Now, friends, only if you know that the RDB Act was earlier named as, I mean, that this RDB Act was very long name. I mean, recovery of debts to banks and the financial institutions Act, something like that. It was a big name. Now it has been shortened, and it is shortly, in very short, it is now renamed as Recovery of Debts and the Insolvency Act, RDB Act, and the Bankruptcy Act. Recovery of Debts and the Bankruptcy, RDB Act now. And other clauses of the RDB Act have been suitably modified so that the DRT can function by virtue of this new notification in cases of IBC also. Now, friends, let us come to the part 3. I will rush through rather, because I will take rather 10-15 minutes, not much of the minutes here. Then probably we'll come out with a question answer. Now, friends, as far as this this is concerned, I mean, minimum amount is 1,000 rupees, threshold limit I've already told. Adjudicating authority I've already explained. Now, application for the insolvency can be filed either by the debtor or the creditor, right? And partnership so far is not applicable, but in case of partnership, it can be filed by the majority of the partners. Now, friends, let me rush through the things. I mean, the application can be filed by the debtor in form number A. Now, but provided, I mean, there are conditions. Provided that debtor is not an undischarged bankrupt. What do we mean by undischarged bankrupt? Now, undischarged bankrupt means he is not a discharged bankrupt. Now, discharged bankrupt means, I mean, we have already discussed that after this insolvency resolution process, there will be a process of bankruptcy. Now, after this process of bankruptcy, when all the assets of the bankrupts are distributed, there is nothing more left, right? Then the discharge order is issued by the adjudicating authority in favor of the bankrupt that you are discharged from all these debts which are mentioned in the order itself. From all the specified debts in the order, you are discharged. So if a person is a bankrupt but is still not discharged, it means he is an undischarged, then he is still undischarged, then he cannot make an application, right? A person then not undergoing any of the following process, I mean, neither he is undergoing a fresh start, neither he is undergoing any IRP process, then an application has been admitted in respect of the debtor 12 months prior to, I mean, if somebody has undergone a IRP process, I mean, in last 12 months, then also he cannot make an application. Now, similarly, the creditors can also initiate this insolvency resolution process against an individual personal guarantor in form number C. But there is a condition here. Like we have a condition in case of CRP for operational creditors that they have to serve a demand notice. Here also there is a question of serving a demand notice in form number B. So if a creditor wants to initiate, first they have to serve a demand notice in form number B, wherein they will be giving a 14 days time to the debtor, to the person concerned or personal guarantor concerned, asking him to pay the amount. Unlike CIRP, where the corporate debtor can demonstrate or can raise the issue of a pre-existing dispute, here there is no such shelter to the debtor. So there is no criteria that whether there is a pre-existing dispute or whether there is not. In any case, that he is, by virtue of having received the notice, he has to pay the amount within 14 days. If he does not pay the amount within 14 days, then the creditor can file the application in form number C. Then friends, and applications shall be, now a lot of details are to be accompanied. These are also, let us not go into detail. Now, now what is an interim moratorium? I already explained. The moment you file an application, interim moratorium starts. Now, appointment of RP. Now, RP can be appointed by the debtor or the creditor. If debtor is filing an application, they can name the RP within their in their application itself. Similarly, if a creditor is filing an application, they can name the RP in their application itself. If nobody is naming any RP, then obviously the adjudicating authority, in consultation with the IBBI, is the same process. And what will happen? The IBBI, since they already have sent all the adjudicating authority a complete approved list of the resolution professional, insolvency professional. So simply what what NCLT is doing, the same thing will be done in case of personal guarantee also, that they will be simply looking at those panels and will be appointing an RP. Now, section 98 talks about the replacement of an RP. Like there we have a removal of RP. So we have the concept like here also. Here also. Section 99 talks about the submission. Now here, the process is what? The moment an application is made before the adjudicating authority, either it is NCLT or it is DRT. In most of the cases for the personal guarantor, it will be NCLT, let me tell you. Right. So the moment it is admitted, the moment it is filed, now the RP, the resolution professional, after he has been appointed, now he will prepare a report. He will first prepare a report whether this, as per him, whether this is maintainable or not maintainable. This entire application is maintainable or not maintainable. And for this, he will verify, he will see the evidences and other things. Now, after receiving his report, RP, resolution professional, so appointed, within 10 days from his appointment, right, shall send his recommendation to the adjudicating authority whether this application should be admitted, should be accepted or rejected within 10 days. Now, what adjudicating authority will do? We now in the section 100, adjudicating authority within 14 days of the receipt of such report by report from resolution professional, RP, will do two things, either of the two things, either they will admit or they will reject. If they admit, then it is called the commencement of the insolvency resolution proceedings, right? And if they reject, then what will happen? What are the consequences of the rejection? Then in that case, you see the bold, the two lines written in the bold. Order, it will also order in the same rejection order that order shall record that the creditors are entitled to file for a bankruptcy order. The insolvency petition is rejected, then straightway they will write in their order, the adjudicating authority will write in their order that the creditors will be entitled straightway to file for the bankruptcy order. And if it is admitted, then the process of insolvency resolution will start. Now, commencement, from the date of it is admission. Now, how long it will continue, the insolvency resolution process? Insolvency resolution process will cease, it will continue only till 180 days. Moratorium. The moratorium will continue, obviously that is in sync with this insolvency resolution process. The moratorium will continue till 180 days from the date of admission of the application or the date of approval of repayment plan, whichever is earlier. Suppose if the repayment plan is approved before 180th day, then obviously the moratorium will come to an end on that day. What is the effect of moratorium? We all know. So let us not go much into detail. Though there are differences, as compared to the CRP. So these are very easy, one can understand. Now, section 102 regarding the public notice. The moment now we are into when the adjudicating authority have admitted the application. Now here what will happen, adjudicating authority shall issue the public notice within 7 days. It says adjudicating authority shall issue the public, but by virtue of the regulation which have come into force, now it is very clear, it has been stated notification that adjudicating authority will ask the resolution professional to make this public announcement within 7 days. Now, within 7 days of the public announcement, public notice, the claims will be invited. 21 days time will be given for the claims, registering of the claims by the creditors under section 103. The claims can be sent by the courier, speed post, or the registered letter. Section 104, then under section 104, the RP will prepare a list of creditors. Then 105, RP will prepare a repayment plan in consultation with the debtor. And now here he will take a call whether the MOC meeting of the creditors is required or it is okay in his opinion. Even if the meeting of creditor is not called, this decision has to be taken by the RP. Now, what are the contents of the repayment plan? Is much like the same as the resolution plan. Couple of new things here. Like what are the dates of the corporate debtor? Now, details of the excluded assets. There are certain assets which are excluded from the assets category. There are certain debts which are also excluded. We'll come to that later on, after 5 minutes. And a couple of things, what will be the source of funding and all these things will be there. Section 106, then after this repayment plan is, prepared, the RP, the resolution professional, will submit this repayment plan along with his report, whether this plan is to be, he will submit a report on this repayment plan within the 21 days from the last date of submission of the claim under section 102, right? Report shall also indicate whether there is any necessity of summoning a meeting of the creditors if required to consider the repayment plan. If the RP is of the opinion that the meeting is to be convened, then he has to convene a meeting of the creditors by giving a notice of not less than 14 days, but not more than 28 days. Then the meeting of creditors will be convened. Now, what is the voting? Like here also the notice is sent that the meeting of the creditors is called. The differences, let me tell you, as compared to the CIRP, any secured creditor, all creditors are part of this thing. Now, whoever files the claim will only be part of this this MOC meeting of the creditors. Now, the voting share will be in proportion to the debt or total debt of the total claim filed. Another thing, secured creditor. As far as the secured creditors are concerned, before they exercise any voting right with respect to this repayment plan, approval of repayment plan, they have to first relinquish their security interest. Then only they will be allowed to vote for the in this meeting of creditors for the purpose of approving the repayment plan. If the secured creditor do not relinquish their security interest, then they will be allowed to vote only with respect to the unsecured portion of their total debt. So if 100 rupee is the total amount of debt of the unsecured creditor, and 60 rupees is covered by the securities, different types of securities, which they are holding as security interest, then they will be having a voting right only with respect to rupees 40, which is the unsecured portion, and not with respect to 60. This has to be kept in mind because all other creditors are obviously unsecured, so that all remain in the same parity and they can take a common decision. Basic purpose is this. But if a repayment plan has been approved, wherein the consent of the secured creditor was not taken, not taken. Why? Voting was not taken. Why? Because they have not relinquished their interest and there was no unsecured portion. In that situation, the repayment plan, for this repayment plan, the specific consent of the secured creditor have to be taken so far as the matter is concerned regarding the disposal of their securities. Now, friends, section 108 is regarding the conduct of the meeting. It's almost same there we have. But one thing is here, if the COC, I will call it rather MOC, if the meeting of creditors decide to modify the repayment plan or make an alteration to the repayment plan, then they cannot do it without the approval of the personal guarantor. So that is why I call it, he has a sort of veto in case of repayment plan. Now, quorum of the meeting is 33% of the total voting power. And for the general resolution, for the general resolution of the MOC, it is more than 50% voting. But for the approval of the repayment plan, it is more than 3/4 of the total voting power. Then voting by the committee, this I have already discussed. Then section 109 is voting rights and meeting of the creditors. I think I have already discussed. Now, section 110 is regarding the rights of the secured creditors in relation to the repayment plan. Now, this I have already discussed. Yes. Section 111, approval of the repayment plan by the creditors. Now, creditors have approved it. Now, the matter will go to the adjudicating authority along with the report of the resolution professional. And then adjudicating authority will either approve it or they may not approve it. Now, section 113 is regarding the notice of decision taken at the meeting of the creditors. Section 114, for any meeting of the MOC, any decision is taken, then the copy of that minutes is to be filed with the adjudicating authority. That is 113, the earlier screen. Section 114 is regarding the order of the adjudicating authority on repayment plan. Now they might accept it, they may, they might reject it. That's up to them. If they approve it, then the repayment plan will be implemented. If they reject it, then the repayment plan, then they will simultaneously make an order for the, that anybody, can file an order for this bankruptcy. Any person aggrieved, even the debtor or the creditor can file an application for the bankruptcy. Now, section 115 is regarding the effect of order of AA on a repayment plan. Now, if it is rejected, then the debtors or creditors shall be entitled to apply for bankruptcy. I've already explained, so let us not repeat it. Section 116 and 117 is regarding the implementation, supervision, and the completion of the repayment plan. Once it is approved in the CIRP, it is the task of the monitoring agency. Here the same in the IRP. Here it is the same resolution professional who is entrusted with the task of implementation, supervision, and the completion of the repayment plan. Now, section 118, now repayment plan, there is a fixed period given that within this period, the entire repayment plan has to be implemented. Now, if suppose within that period, the repayment plan, all the creditors are not fully paid off and the period is over, then what will happen? Then there will be a premature termination of this repayment plan. And in that, what will happen? Then the repayment plan, what is the net consequence of it? The repayment plan have failed. So once the repayment plan have failed, then obviously the adjudicating authority, whether NCLT or DRT, they will make an order that the plan have prematurely failed, and anybody interested, if they are interested, they can file an application for bankruptcy. Now, section 119 is the discharge order. If the repayment plan is satisfactorily implemented, then the discharge order will be issued by the adjudicating authority, and the discharge order shall discharge a discharge order shall discharge any other person in respect of any debt not mentioned in the repayment plan. Whatever is mentioned, whatever is mentioned in the discharge order, and the debt type of the debts will also be mentioned. Only those debts will be discharged. No other debts will be get discharged by virtue of this discharge order. Now, another thing, like we have section 29A, we have section 18, regulation 18 here, that no interested person can purchase the assets like the RP or the RP of the main corporate debtor or any person relative or any professional appointed, or even the creditors cannot buy or purchase the assets of the personal guarantor. Then role of the adjudicating authority, these are the different sections which have been highlighted here, under which section what is required to be done by the adjudicating authority. These are the two slides. So friends, this is regarding the insolvency resolution. But friends, once this fails, I will come to another slide and I only take 2-3 minutes regarding the bankruptcy proceedings. And I will come to that. Now, friends, regarding the bankruptcy, let me tell you, one thing that after this insolvency resolution process as well, the bankruptcy will start. Now, bankruptcy, like there in the case of liquidation. Now, one definition, the chief aim, second paragraph I'm reading, the chief aim of the every system of bankruptcy law should be to combine and regulate two great objectives. First, the distribution of the effect of the debtor in the most expeditious and the most equal and the most economical modes. Secondly, the liberation of his person from the demands of his creditors, whom he has made a full surrender of his property. This is the basic concept of the bankruptcy as per the Hells-Burry bankruptcy law. Now, bankruptcy, what does the bankruptcy mean as per section 79.3? It means the state of being bankrupt. Now, there are the earlier two models which were handling the insolvency of the personal individuals. These are two enactments. The Presidency Township Insolvency Act of 1909, which was applicable only in the case of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. And another act for rest of India, it was the Provincial Insolvency Act 1920, which was applicable for rest of India. Now, as far as the personal guarantors are concerned, now since they have been brought into the IBC, so far as they are concerned, these two acts now no more will be applicable. So the lenders now cannot resort to these two acts as far as the personal guarantors insolvency is concerned. Now this I already explained. Now there are 39 DRTs all over India and there are 5 DRATs as of now. Now, when could the bankruptcy petition be filed? It is not automatic, I've already told you. Now, when could it be triggered? It could be triggered when the repayment, when you file an application for initiation of insolvency and that is rejected, one situation. Second situation is when the repayment plan is prematurely terminated because it could not be implemented within time. And the third situation is when the repayment plan itself is rejected while the adjudicating authority has rejected it. So there are three situations in which the bankruptcy applications can be filed. Now, in the bankruptcy application also the meeting of, the meeting, MOC has to be constituted, claims are to be invited afresh. Now, what is, there are certain dates, let me tell you, there are certain dates which are not part of the debts, which cannot be discharged. So what are those dates? Like liability to pay fines imposed by the courts or the tribunals, liability to pay damages or negligence, right? Or any contractual obligation or legal obligation, liability to pay maintenance. Suppose, alimony, to the wife in case of a divorce. So these are the debts which cannot be, for which there cannot be any solution. Then liability to pay student loan or any other debt as may be prescribed. Now, what is a bankruptcy debt? Bankruptcy debt means a debt owed by the bankrupt on the bankruptcy commencement date. Right? Bankruptcy commencement date is the date when the bankruptcy application is admitted by the adjudicating authority, or any other date which has come later on after the bankruptcy commencement date, or any interest on the debt under section 171. This is called the bankruptcy date. These are the excluded date. Then who can file an application is almost same like insolvency resolution process. Now within 90 days of the bankruptcy order, one can, it doesn't say 90 days, it says 3 months. So within 3 months of the bankruptcy order, one can prefer an application for bankruptcy. Now here also the same concept, there will be an interim moratorium, there will be a moratorium. Now the bankruptcy trustee have all the powers. He will be managing like we have in the case of a liquidation. He will be managing the estate. Here also he will be managing the estate. There are certain assets which are not part of like the PF fund and all these things. Here also they are also not part of this estate. Now I'm not going detail into the bankruptcy process. Now a couple of things. Let me just go to the final thing. Which is the waterfall. Yeah. As far as the priority of the payment of debts are concerned, I mean, first, obviously, like we have the CRP cost and liquidation cost. Here it is the cost and the expenses incurred by bankruptcy trustee, who is the insolvency professional. Now, after this first ladder, we have the worksman dues up to 24 months. Then we have the secured creditors, right? Then we have in the fourth ladder, we have the employees' wages and unpaid dues up to 12 months. Then we have the government dues, you see, and then we have the other debts. So there is a distinct pattern as far as the waterfall is concerned, as compared to the CRP and as compared to the insolvency professional. And friends, I mean, I'm not going into the, I thought I wanted to discuss the different sections applicable regarding as per the Indian Contract Act. Since time is not permitting, let me stop here. Probably, I think my first slide, my first PPT was probably not shared. I think because of some error on my side. But I think the second PPT was shared. But anyway, I will be sharing my both the PPTs, including my this presentation on Indian Contract Act as far as the guarantee portion is concerned, with all the participants. Now, I think, friends, we can have some interactive question answers, and it's over to Sudhir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for enlightening us with your views and taking us through the insolvency process and the bankruptcy process. People are asking about the PPT, so sure we'll share that PPT which you have prepared. So now I'll be taking certain questions, right? So Mr. Ashok Singla is asking whether IBC is applicable to a trust or society running a hospital or whatever.
IBC is not applicable to the trust or society.
It is only
there has to be a separate notification. There is no such notification. The government has a power, but then no such power have been exercised.
Right. It is applicable to incorporated entities as such.
Incorporated entities, and right now, as far as current situation is concerned, companies, LPs,
right. So there are some questions which you have already covered, but people have asked, so I'm just asking that. So somebody is asking what debt is excluded, sir?
Excluded debt means certain debts. What is the purpose of this entire insolvency process? That to have a satisfactory solution, a restructuring proposal. But certain debts will be out of that restructuring proposal or OTS proposal, right? Certain debts. What are those? These debts are called excluded debts. Now, excluded debts are like your penalties, which have been imposed by any court, tribunal, or any authority, like any legal commitments or any student fee, for the education loan. So all these are excluded debts. These will not be part of any money. It means the bankrupt person or the personal guarantor will have to pay these debts in will not be part of this process.
Sir, whether the same resolution professional can be there for CD as well as for the personal guarantor?
No, here I started my deliberation. I took half an hour because that was a very important part of it. Let me tell you, in one of the, we will take the, there is no answer to it. Number one, first answer, straight answer, there is no answer to it. Whether there will be a same resolution professional, but taking the cue, how these proceedings will be going ahead in future before the adjudicating authority, there always comes a question, whether there will be same resolution professional or different resolution professional. If the resolution professional are different, how the things will be moving in tandem. So these questions are arising. In one scenario, I tell you, where there were multiple applications. There were multiple applications in case of a corporate guarantee, in case of CRP, where the NCLT has ordered that RP should be common. So I'm not having a ready citation right now, but in one of the case, it was ordered that the RP should be common. So, but I really don't know what will happen in the case of these personal guarantees, whether the RP will be common or not. This remains to be, this will be a very trying time for the courts, for the adjudicating.
Sir, what is your view, which is better, having the same RP or different RP, which is better, sir, practically?
Obviously, the one RP is always the better choice. Otherwise, the things will go haywire. One will be taking one view, another will be taking different view. Timing will not match. There will not be synchronization. So ultimate purpose will be frustrated. This is my view.
And sir, again, same question. I mean, you have already covered, but this is important, so I'm taking this. What are the excluded assets, sir?
Excluded assets, let me repeat you. I mean, the purpose of entire resolution process, whether it is corporate or personal, the purpose is to restructure your, because your assets are not able to pay your debts fully. So whatever your debts are, these are restructured, haircuts are there, and then you come out with a resolution plan or repayment plan here. But certain debts, in case of personal guarantor, in case of an individual, will not form part of this restructuring proposal. These are called excluded debts. These are excluded. These are not form part of the debt. So there cannot be any restructuring. There cannot be any haircut. There cannot be any deferment. These debts have to be paid in full by the personal guarantor, whether in the insolvency process or in the bankruptcy process. So these are called excluded debt. There will not be any discharge order with respect to the excluded debt. Let me clarify.
Sir, can
Next.
a repayment plan be submitted without calling for the meeting of?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is the prerogative of the resolution professional. But let me tell you, I skipped this thing because of the constraint of time. Any financial creditor having more than 33% of the voting power can ask for meeting of creditors. In that case, even if the resolution professional have formed an opinion, then there is no need of any meeting to be convened. But if 33% of the financial creditor wants to have a meeting, then it will be mandatory for him to convene a meeting to approve the repayment plan.
So can a guarantee be invoked before claiming the same from the corporate person? I think you covered that,
I
but still
covered
somebody is asking.
wherein,
So
yeah. In case of personal guarantee, I can tell you, I mean, number one, the person concerned should be a guarantor to a company, to a corporate person. And number two, that guarantee must have been invoked. I mean, these are two conditions again here. This guarantee must have been invoked. Guarantee can be invoked only by way of a notice. If the guarantee has not been invoked, then obviously the initiation of this part 3 cannot be made. But I have already covered this, since the liability of the principal borrower and the guarantor are coextensive, they go together. So I mean, it is as per the Indian Contract Act, it is as per all the legal cases, as per the even Piramal also, that the proceeding can be initiated against anyone. But they cannot be double proceeding. That is what the Piramal says. Piramal says one cannot have the advantage of double dividend, double dip. I mean, there's a concept of double dip. You cannot take two advantages. I mean, that is the one.
sure. Sir, is bankruptcy process automatic or?
No, I have already told you that unlike CIRP, where the liquidation is automatically triggered on the failure of the CIRP, here there is no automatic trigger. This is number 1 point. So since there is no automatic trigger, if the insolvency resolution fails, then one has to file an application with the adjudicating authority for passing a bankruptcy order. So there has to be a specific application. If there is no specific application, it is not an automatic process. And number one, whenever somebody files an application for bankruptcy order, it cannot be rejected by the adjudicating authority. Let me tell you again this thing. Like adjudicating authority in the first case of insolvency resolution, they can accept or they can reject. But in case of a bankruptcy, if somebody prefers to file an application for the bankruptcy after the IRP process has failed, then the adjudicating authority will only accept it. They cannot reject it. Why so? Because adjudicating authority in their order itself, while rejecting the, while rejecting either the repayment plan or either it is, prematurely or whatever, there are three situations. In all the three situations, the adjudicating authority have ordered that if anybody is interested, they can file the bankruptcy application. So since this is a right which have been given by the adjudicating authority itself, that right cannot be taken away. And so in bankruptcy applications, once filed with the adjudicating authority, cannot be rejected.
Sir, whether valuers need to be appointed?
Now, this is
Not
question is
required.
absolutely silent, but then, well, okay, why the valuers cannot be appointed? Again, I mean, this is the process. So valuers should be appointed. I mean, why not? I mean, valuers should be appointed. I mean, these are again, these the law will involve, the regulation will also undergo change. I mean, lot of things will undergo. Right now, there is no specific provision for the appointment of the viewer and for the valuation report. I mean, there is no specific provision. We can simply make a guess. And my view is that, okay, why not? I mean, let the resolution professional should appoint a valuer. Otherwise, how will you go? How will you assess the valuation?
I think it will depend on the nature of the assets, right?
Yeah,
So
depend on the if it is a Vijay Mallya case, then probably one has to appoint.
sure,
But yeah, it
sure.
always depends on the nature of the case.
Right,
Probably
sir.
there will be more and more clarification also in due course of time.
Right. So thank you so much, sir. So thanks for your time. People are asking whether we'll be sharing the videos also,
One
video
at a time.
also
I will be
together with the
sharing three
PPT.
PPTs, Sudhirji.
Sure,
I will
sir.
be sharing three PPT. One is on the Indian Contract Act relating to the guarantees from section 126 right till 140, which talks about the contract of guarantee and the contract of indemnity also. Right, 124 also. It's rather I mean, my PPT on entire Indian Contract Act. It's a complete PPT I will be sharing. And another on the IRP process. And the third is on the bankruptcy process.
Sure, sir. And we'll be surely sharing the link for the video. So we'll be uploading this on YouTube. So we'll be sharing that link. So Amit, it is your duty that, the PPT goes to all the attendees, because last time we had this complaint that PPT was not shared. So I'm not getting into whose, fault it
Last time
was.
PPT,
So,
Sudhirji, last time PPT, I have shared a link. My PPT was there in my website.
sure, sir.
So I've shared a link, and probably you can share that link with all the earlier participants and have the advantage.
We will do that, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for coming, sir. So we will be planning next session with you, sir. The case laws were pending, sir. If you allow us, we can have that session, sir. Or
One
people
session
present can also give their views. What are the other topics they'll be more interested in, discussing.
Yeah, surely, Sudhirji. Thank you very much for taking this initiative. I mean, really, it's laudable, and thanks all the participants who have been so interactive. I mean, it was a two-way traffic. I mean, at the end, and everyone was asking the way the questions have been asked. It seems that everyone was attentive and was trying to understand the concept fully.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
sir.
very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.